Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he examined the ancient weapon before him. The archaeological dig on Kepler 442b had yielded many treasures, but this sword was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its blade seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and strange symbols ran along its length, pulsing with a faint blue glow. "Another human artifact," muttered Zektar, the Thraxian expedition leader. His forearms moved with practiced efficiency as he catalogued the day's finds. "Your species left quite a mess on this planet before the Great Exodus." Marcus nodded absently. The history book spoke of humanity's brief colonization of this world 3 centuries ago, before some unknown catastrophe forced them to abandon everything and flee back to Earth. The official records were strangely vague about what had happened here. The excavation site buzzed with activity. Dozens of alien archaeologists from across the Galactic Federation worked alongside the small human team. Most paid little attention to Marcus, considering humans to be a minor species that had barely begun to explore beyond their home system. They were here as a courtesy, nothing more. "The sword appears to be ceremonial," Dr. Yelena observed. The Zentorian scholar's tentacles danced across her translation device as she studied the symbols. The markings suggest it belonged to someone of great importance, perhaps a military leader or religious figure. Marcus reached out to touch the weapon, then hesitated. Something about it made his skin crawl, as if the very air around it was charged with electricity. The other archaeologists continued their work, seemingly unaffected by whatever presence emanated from the blade. "Careful with that," warned Commander Throck, the expedition's security chief. The massive Corathan's 6 eyes fixed on Marcus with obvious suspicion. "Human clumsiness has already damaged 3 artifacts this week." The insult stung, but Marcus had learned to ignore such comments. Humans were viewed as newcomers to galactic civilization, barely evolved beyond primitive savagery according to most species. Their technology was centuries behind the Federation standard, and their military was considered laughably weak. As the day's work concluded, the team prepared to transport their findings to the research station. The sword was carefully placed in a protective containment field, its glow seeming to intensify as darkness fell. Marcus noticed that several of the alien workers gave it a wide berth, though none would admit to feeling uneasy about the artifact. Back at the research facility, the sword was placed in the main laboratory for detailed analysis. Marcus volunteered for the night shift, claiming he wanted to run additional scans on the human artifacts. In truth, he felt inexplicably drawn to the weapon, as if it was calling to him. The laboratory was quiet except for the hum of equipment and the soft footsteps of security patrols. Marcus approached the containment field housing the sword, his heart racing for reasons he couldn't explain. The symbols on the blade pulsed more rapidly now, their blue light casting strange shadows on the walls. "Computer, can you translate these markings?" Marcus asked. The AI's voice echoed in the empty lab. Translation incomplete. The language appears to be an archaic form of Terran Standard, but the syntax is unlike any known human dialect. Several symbols remain unidentified. Marcus leaned closer to study the blade. The nearest symbol looked almost familiar, like something he had seen in old family documents. His grandmother had kept a collection of antique books, many written in languages that predated the formation of the Federation. Could this sword somehow be connected to his own heritage? As he pondered this possibility, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Emergency lights bathed everything in red as security teams rushed to respond to some unknown threat. Marcus could hear shouting in various alien languages, but the translation system seemed to be malfunctioning. Through the laboratory windows, he saw ships approaching the research station. They were unlike any vessels in the Federation database. Sleek, predatory craft that moved with impossible grace through the atmosphere. Energy weapons lanced out from the ships, striking the station's defensive shields with devastating effect. "All personnel to emergency stations." Commander Throck's voice boomed over the intercom. "We are under attack by unknown vessels. Repeat, this is not a drill." Marcus watched in horror as the attacking ship systematically dismantled the station's defenses. The Federation's advanced technology seemed useless against these mysterious invaders. Within minutes, the shields collapsed entirely, and boarding pods began attaching themselves to the hull. The laboratory doors burst open as armed figures in dark armor stormed inside. Their faces were hidden behind featureless masks, but their movements spoke of deadly purpose. They ignored the other artifacts completely, their attention focused entirely on the sword. "Stand away from the relic, human," one of the intruders commanded. The voice was electronically distorted, making it impossible to identify the speaker's species. "You do not understand what you tamper with." Marcus stepped back instinctively, but something made him hesitate before moving away completely. The sword's glow had intensified dramatically, and he could swear he heard whispers in a language that seemed hauntingly familiar. "That weapon belongs to us," the lead intruder continued. "It was stolen from our people long ago, and we have come to reclaim it." "I don't understand," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. The archaeological survey identified this as a human artifact. "If it belongs to your people, why was it found in human ruins?" The intruder's helmet tilted slightly, as if considering how much to reveal. "Your species has a talent for taking things that do not belong to them. This blade was forged in the fires of our homeworld, blessed by our ancestors and wielded by our greatest warriors. Its power is not meant for human hands." Around the laboratory, other members of the expedition had been gathered by additional intruders. Marcus could see the fear in their eyes as they huddled together, uncertain of their fate. The attackers seemed professional, disciplined, and utterly determined to complete their mission. "Please," Dr. Yelena called out, her tentacles trembling with terror. "We are researchers, not soldiers. We meant no harm by studying your artifact." The lead intruder ignored her plea, instead focusing on the containment field surrounding the sword. Strange devices emerged from hidden compartments in their armor, tools that seemed designed specifically for this task. Within moments, they had bypassed the field's security protocols and gained access to the weapon. As gloved hands reached for the sword's hilt, Marcus felt an overwhelming urge to intervene. Something deep in his mind screamed that this was wrong, that these people had no right to claim the blade. Before he could stop himself, he lunged forward, desperate to reach the weapon before the intruders could take it. Marcus's hand closed around the sword's hilt before the intruder could claim it. The moment his skin made contact with the ancient metal, agony beyond description shot through his entire body. It felt as if molten fire was flowing through his veins, burning away everything he thought he knew about himself. The intruders stepped back in shock as brilliant white light erupted from where Marcus touched the weapon. The laboratory's equipment sparked and overloaded as energy cascaded through the room. Even through their masks, the attackers' surprise was obvious as they watched the human endure what should have been impossible. "Release the blade," the lead intruder shouted over the growing energy storm. "No mortal being can withstand the Guardian's fire." But Marcus couldn't let go even if he wanted to. The sword seemed fused to his hand now, its power flowing through him in waves of excruciating pain and impossible strength. Images flashed through his mind, memories that weren't his own, of battles fought among distant stars, of warriors wielding weapons of light against creatures of living shadow. The other expedition members cowered against the walls as the energy storm intensified. The sword's blue glow had transformed into something far more potent, a radiance that seemed to burn away the darkness itself. The mysterious attackers raised their weapons, but their energy beams simply dissipated when they struck the expanding field of light surrounding Marcus. Through the chaos, he began to understand what was happening to him. The sword wasn't just a weapon, it was a key, a conduit to something far greater than anyone had imagined. The pain in his hand was his human physiology adapting to forces that most beings couldn't even perceive, let alone channel. "Impossible," one of the intruders whispered. "The bloodline was supposed to be extinct. We made certain of it 3 centuries ago." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. These beings weren't just thieves or treasure hunters. They were the reason humanity had fled Kepler 442b. They had driven his people from this world, and now they had returned to claim what they believed was rightfully theirs. As understanding dawned, the pain began to subside. The fire in his veins transformed into something else, a strength he had never felt before, a connection to the weapon that went beyond mere physical contact. The sword had chosen him, recognized something in his genetic code that marked him as its rightful bearer. "The weapon belongs to us," the lead intruder insisted, though doubt had crept into their electronically distorted voice. "We are the Nexari, its creators. You are nothing but a primitive species that stumbled onto power beyond your comprehension." Marcus raised the sword, and its light pulsed with renewed intensity. The blade felt weightless in his grip now, as natural as his own arm. When he spoke, his voice carried an authority that surprised even him. "You created nothing. he said, the words flowing from knowledge he hadn't possessed moments before. You stole this technology from the ancients just as you tried to steal it from humanity. But the weapon remembers its true purpose. The Nexari attackers exchanged glances, their confidence clearly shaken. Their leader raised one hand and additional troops began filing into the laboratory. These new arrivals carried heavier weapons, their armor bearing symbols that spoke of elite military units. Even if you can wield the blade, the leader said, you are still only one human against dozens of our finest warriors. Surrender now, and we may allow your companions to live. Marcus looked around at the terrified faces of his fellow expedition members. Dr. Yelena was clutching her translation device so tightly her tentacles had turned pale. Commander Thruck had positioned himself protectively in front of the other researchers, but even his imposing Korathan physique seemed small compared to the Nexari soldiers. These people had treated him with condescension and barely concealed contempt throughout the expedition, viewing humans as inferior beings who contributed little to galactic civilization. Now their lives depended on his actions, and he found himself wondering if they deserved his protection. The sword pulsed in his hand, and suddenly he could sense their thoughts, their emotions. Fear dominated their minds, but underneath he detected something else: genuine regret for how they had treated him, and a growing recognition that they had underestimated humanity's potential. You have 1 minute to release your hostages and withdraw from this system, Marcus said, raising the blade so its light filled the room. After that, I cannot guarantee your survival. The Nexari leader laughed, a harsh sound even through the electronic distortion. Threats from a human? Your species couldn't even defend one colony world against us. What makes you think one man with an ancient relic can accomplish what your entire military could not? Marcus smiled grimly. The memories flowing from the sword painted a different picture of that long-ago conflict. Humanity hadn't fled in defeat. They had made a tactical withdrawal to protect something far more valuable than a single world. The colonists of Kepler 442b had discovered the truth about the Nexari's stolen technology, and they had hidden that knowledge before evacuating. My people didn't run because they were weak, Marcus replied. They ran because they knew you would eventually return, and they wanted to be ready for you. The sword's energy began building toward something momentous. Marcus could feel power beyond imagination flowing through the weapon, waiting for his command. The Nexari soldiers raised their weapons, but their leader held up a restraining hand. You're bluffing, the leader said, though uncertainty colored their words. No single weapon could threaten our entire force. Marcus extended his awareness through the sword, reaching out to touch the attacking ships surrounding the research station. He could sense their crews, their weapons, their defensive systems, all of it laid bare before his enhanced perception. The Nexari technology was indeed advanced, but it was built on foundations they didn't truly understand. Your ancestors stole this technology from beings you could never comprehend, Marcus said, but you never learned to use it properly. You've been copying and modifying devices without understanding their true nature. With surgical precision, he reached out through the sword's connection to the quantum field that powered both the Nexari ships and the ancient weapon. The civilization that had originally created this technology had built safeguards into their designs, safeguards that could be activated by those who carried the proper genetic markers. Throughout the attacking fleet, engines began shutting down, weapons powered off, life support systems switched to emergency mode. The Nexari had built their entire civilization on stolen technology, and now that technology was being reclaimed by its rightful inheritors. Impossible, the leader gasped as reports flooded in from their ships. The failsafes were destroyed millennia ago. Nothing is ever truly destroyed, Marcus replied. It simply waits for the right moment to return. The laboratory fell silent except for the hum of the sword's energy, and the panicked voices of Nexari officers trying to understand why their ships were failing. Marcus could feel the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders as he realized this moment would change everything, not just for the expedition, but for humanity's place in the galaxy. The Nexari leader stumbled backward as more reports flooded their communication channels. Across their fleet, ship after ship was going dark as ancient safeguards activated systems that had lain dormant for thousands of years. The stolen technology that formed the backbone of their civilization was turning against them. This cannot be happening, the leader gasped, their electronic voice cracking with disbelief. Our scientists assured us that all traces of the original programming had been purged. Marcus felt the sword's power flowing through him, connecting him to networks and systems that spanned the galaxy. The weapon wasn't just a blade. It was a master key to technology that predated most known civilizations. Through its connection, he could sense countless Nexari installations throughout space suddenly finding their systems compromised. "Your scientists were wrong," Marcus said, his voice carrying an authority that made even the hardened Nexari soldiers step back. The ancients built their safeguards into the very fabric of reality itself. Every piece of technology you stole carries their mark, waiting for the day when their heirs would return to claim what was rightfully theirs. Dr. Yelena watched in amazement as the human she had dismissed as primitive wielded power beyond her comprehension. Her tentacles trembled as she tried to process what she was witnessing. The translation device in her hands was receiving signals from across the galaxy, reports of Nexari technology failing on hundreds of worlds, and the implications are staggering, she whispered to Commander Throck. If humans are truly the heirs to ancient technology, it would explain so much about their rapid advancement despite their apparent primitiveness. The Korathan commander nodded grimly. His species had always wondered how humanity had managed to develop faster than light travel so quickly, after discovering they weren't alone in the universe. Now it seemed their advancement might not have been as independent as everyone believed. The lead Nexari intruder was frantically trying to re-establish contact with their fleet when new figures entered the laboratory. But these weren't additional soldiers. They were prisoners being escorted by Federation security forces who had somehow managed to turn the tables on their captors. "The Nexari ships are dead in space," reported Lieutenant Kess, a young Altarian officer whose crystalline features glowed with excitement. "Their weapons are offline, their engines are cold, and their life support is running on emergency power only." Marcus could feel the truth of those words through his connection to the sword. The ancient safeguards were incredibly sophisticated, designed to disable stolen technology without harming the beings who operated it. The Nexari would survive, but their technological advantage had evaporated in moments. "How is this possible?" Commander Throck demanded, his 6 eyes fixed on Marcus with a mixture of awe and suspicion. No single weapon should have this kind of range or power. The sword pulsed in Marcus's hand as if responding to the question. Through its connection, he could sense the vast network of quantum-entangled particles that the ancients had woven throughout the galaxy. Every piece of their technology was connected to every other piece, forming a web of influence that spanned countless star systems. The ancients didn't just build technology, Marcus explained. The knowledge flowing from the sword itself. They built an entire infrastructure designed to support their heirs. Every ship, every device, every system they created was part of a larger whole. The Nexari leader's mask had cracked during the chaos, revealing features that were surprisingly humanoid despite their alien origin. Pale skin, large eyes adapted for low light, and delicate bone structure that spoke of a species that had evolved in artificial environments rather than on a natural world. "You don't understand what you're doing," the revealed Nexari pleaded. "Our entire civilization depends on this technology. Without it, billions will die as our life support systems fail and our agricultural worlds become uninhabitable." Marcus felt a moment of doubt. The sword was giving him the power to cripple an entire galactic civilization. But was that justice or genocide? The memories flowing from the weapon showed him glimpses of the Nexari's history. A species that had indeed built their entire society on stolen foundations, but one that now included countless innocent lives. "The safeguards aren't designed to kill," he said finally, the sword's wisdom guiding his words. "They're designed to teach. Your people will learn to survive without stolen technology, or they'll learn to ask for help from those they once considered inferior." Through the quantum network, Marcus began selectively reactivating Nexari systems, but only the ones essential for life support and basic survival. Their weapons remained offline. Their faster-than-light drives were disabled, but their people would live to face the consequences of their ancestors' crimes. "This is impossible," Dr. Yelena breathed, her translation device working frantically to process the flood of information coming from across the galaxy. "The power requirements alone should be beyond any known energy source." Marcus smiled as understanding dawned. "The ancients didn't use energy the way we understand it. They tapped into the fundamental forces that hold reality together. The sword doesn't generate power, it channels it from the quantum foam itself. The implications were staggering. If humans truly were the heirs to ancient technology, it meant their species had capabilities that went far beyond what anyone had imagined. It explained their rapid expansion into space, their innovative solutions to complex problems, and their surprising resilience in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. "The Federation Council will never believe this," Commander Throck muttered. "They'll think we've all lost our minds." Marcus turned to look at the assembled expedition members, aliens from a dozen different species who had treated him with barely concealed contempt just hours before. Now they looked at him with something approaching reverence, finally understanding that they had grossly underestimated humanity's potential. "They'll believe it when they see the evidence," Marcus said. "The sword isn't the only ancient artifact on this world. The entire colony was built on top of a cache of their technology. My ancestors didn't just stumble onto this place, they were guided here." The Nexari leaders struggled to their feet, their damaged mask falling away completely to reveal a face marked by desperation and growing fear. "If humans control ancient technology, it will destabilize the entire galactic order. Species that have dominated for millennia will find themselves at the mercy of a race they considered primitive." Marcus felt the weight of that responsibility settling on his shoulders. The sword was just the beginning. Through its connection, he could sense other caches of ancient technology scattered throughout human space, waiting to be activated by those who carried the proper genetic markers. "Maybe it's time for a new galactic order," he said quietly, "one based on cooperation rather than dominance, where species are judged by their actions rather than their technology." The sword pulsed with approval, its light washing over everyone in the laboratory. As it did, Marcus began to understand that this moment was just the first step in a much larger transformation that would reshape the galaxy itself. News of the incident on Kepler 442b spread through the galactic communication networks like wildfire. Within hours, every major government in the Federation was scrambling to understand how a single human had managed to disable an entire Nexari fleet using nothing but an ancient sword. Marcus stood in the research station's communication center, still holding the blade that had changed everything. The weapon had settled into a steady blue glow, its power contained but ready to respond to his will. Around him, Federation officials argued in a dozen languages, while their translation devices struggled to keep up with the rapid-fire discussions. "The implications are unprecedented," declared Ambassador Zeltara, the Verothi Federation representative. Her insectoid features clicked with agitation as she paced back and forth. "If humans possess technology superior to our most advanced civilizations, it fundamentally alters the balance of power in the galaxy." Marcus listened to the debates with growing frustration. The politicians were more concerned with maintaining their positions than understanding what had really happened. They saw the sword's power as a threat to be contained rather than an opportunity for progress. "With respect, Ambassador," Marcus interrupted, "you're missing the point. This isn't about one species dominating another. The ancient technology responds to genetic markers, but it's designed to promote cooperation, not conquest." Through the sword's connection, he could demonstrate his point. Across the galaxy, ancient installations were awakening, but they weren't activating weapons or defenses. Instead, they were beginning to share knowledge, medical advances, agricultural techniques, solutions to environmental problems that had plagued various species for generations. Dr. Yelena had spent the last 6 hours analyzing the data streams flowing from activated ancient sites. Her tentacles danced excitedly over her instruments as she compiled her findings. "The technology appears to be educational in nature," she reported. "Each installation is broadcasting information specifically tailored to help nearby civilizations overcome their most pressing challenges." The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled officials. For millennia, advancement in the galaxy had come through conquest, trade, or theft. The idea of freely shared knowledge challenged the fundamental assumptions upon which galactic society was built. "This changes everything," Commander Throck observed. "If ancient technology can solve resource scarcity, cure diseases, and provide unlimited clean energy, what happens to the economic systems that govern our civilizations?" Marcus felt the sword's wisdom flowing through him as he considered the question. The ancients had faced the same challenges that plagued the modern galaxy: competition for resources, conflicts between species, the tendency for knowledge to be hoarded by those in power. Their solution had been elegant in its simplicity. The ancients didn't eliminate competition, Marcus explained. They redirected it. Instead of fighting over limited resources, species would compete to solve problems and share solutions. The more a civilization contributed to the common good, the more access they gained to ancient knowledge. The Nexari prisoner who had led the attack watched these proceedings with obvious despair. Their species had built their entire identity around being the galaxy's technological superiors, and now that foundation was crumbling. "You don't understand," they pleaded. "Without technological advantages, how will civilizations maintain order? How will they defend themselves against aggressive neighbors?" Marcus turned to face the captured Nexari, feeling sympathy despite everything their people had done. "The same way Earth's nations learn to coexist," he said, "through mutual dependence and shared benefits. When everyone has access to the same basic technologies, conflicts become less about survival and more about ideology." Ambassador Zeltara's features clicked with skepticism. A naive perspective from a species that has barely ventured beyond its home system. The galaxy has seen thousands of years of warfare, conquest, and domination. You cannot simply wish that history away. The sword pulsed with energy as Marcus felt his patience wearing thin. These beings had spent centuries looking down on humanity, dismissing their potential, and now they refused to consider that there might be a better way forward. Through the weapons connection, he could sense similar debates taking place on worlds. Throughout the Federation, as ancient installations continued to awaken, perhaps a demonstration would be more convincing than words, Marcus said. Before anyone could object, he reached out through the sword's quantum network and activated a specific ancient installation in the Proxima Centauri system. The facility had been dormant for millennia, buried beneath the surface of a barren moon that Federation surveys had written off as worthless. The installation came online with a surge of power that registered on sensors throughout the system. Within minutes, it began broadcasting a solution to a plague that had been ravaging the nearby Zentaurian colonies for decades. The cure was elegant, effective, and could be implemented using technology that the Zentaurians already possessed. "Impossible," breathed the Zentaurian medical officer who was part of the expedition. "Our best scientists have worked on that plague for 30 years without success." "How could an ancient computer solve it so quickly?" Marcus smiled grimly. "Because the ancients faced the same plague 50,000 years ago. They solved it, recorded the solution, and left it waiting for when it would be needed again. That's what their technology does. It learns from the past to solve problems in the present." The communication channels erupted with excited chatter as news of the cure spread through Zentaurian space. Within hours, the plague that had claimed millions of lives was being systematically eliminated. The gratitude pouring in from the affected colonies was genuine and overwhelming. "This is just the beginning," Marcus continued, his voice carrying the authority of the weapon he wielded. "There are thousands of ancient installations throughout the galaxy, each containing solutions to problems we haven't even recognized yet. But they won't activate for conquerors or tyrants. They respond to species that demonstrate wisdom, compassion, and a genuine desire to help others." The assembled officials fell silent as the implications sank in. The sword wasn't just a weapon. It was a test, a way of determining which civilizations were ready to inherit the ancients' legacy. And humanity, despite being considered primitive by galactic standards, had apparently passed that test. "The Federation Council will need to convene an emergency session," Ambassador Zeltara said finally. "This discovery will require a complete restructuring of our governmental and economic systems." Marcus nodded, but his attention was already elsewhere. Through the sword's connection, he could sense other humans throughout the galaxy beginning to manifest similar abilities. The genetic markers that allowed him to interface with ancient technology weren't unique. They existed in a significant percentage of the human population, dormant until activated by proximity to ancient sites. As he watched the debates continue around him, Marcus realized that the galaxy was about to experience a transformation unlike anything in its recorded history. The age of technological dominance was ending, and the age of cooperative enlightenment was about to begin. Whether the established powers would embrace that change or resist it remained to be seen, but either way, humanity would no longer be dismissed as a minor species on the galactic stage. 6 months after the awakening on Kepler 442b, The galaxy was transforming in ways no one had anticipated. Marcus stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Ancient Technologies Research Facility, watching as ships from dozens of species arrived to participate in the first Galactic Cooperation Summit. The sword remained at his side, though he rarely needed to draw upon its full power anymore. Ancient installations throughout human space had awakened, and thousands of humans had discovered they possessed the genetic markers necessary to interface with the technology. What had begun as a single archaeological discovery had become a species-wide awakening. "The preliminary reports are encouraging," Dr. Yelana informed him as she approached with her latest analysis. The Zentaurian scientist had become one of humanity's strongest allies, her people's gratitude for the plague cure translating into unwavering support for the new galactic order. Conflicts between member species have decreased by 60% since the ancient installations began sharing their knowledge. Marcus nodded, though he remained cautious about the rapid changes sweeping through the galaxy. Not every species had embraced the new paradigm willingly. Several major powers had initially tried to seize control of ancient installations by force, only to discover that the technology simply refused to respond to aggressive intentions. "What about the resistance movements?" Marcus asked. "Are we still seeing attempts to weaponize ancient technology?" "The Corothan hegemony made another attempt last week," Dr. Yelana reported. "They tried to reverse engineer one of the medical facilities on Rigel 7 to produce biological weapons. The installation detected their intentions and shut down completely. It won't reactivate until they demonstrate genuine peaceful intent." The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy were being forced to learn lessons that humanity had struggled with throughout its own history. That true strength came from cooperation, not domination. The ancient technology was essentially forcing the galaxy to evolve beyond its warlike tendencies. Commander Throck approached from across the observation deck, his 6 eyes reflecting a mixture of respect and lingering uncertainty. The Corothan officer had become an unlikely ally, his species gradually accepting that their military-dominated culture needed to change if they wanted access to ancient knowledge. "The Federation Council has reached a decision," Throck announced. "They're officially recognizing humanity's role as guardians of ancient technology. The vote was closer than your supporters hoped, but it passed." Marcus felt a surge of relief. The political battles of the past months had been exhausting, with various species attempting to claim authority over ancient installations within their territories. The Federation's recognition of humanity's unique role would help prevent future conflicts. "There's more," Throck continued. "They're also establishing a new governing body, the Galactic Heritage Council. Each species will have representation, but humans will hold veto power over any decisions regarding ancient technology." The news was significant, but Marcus wasn't entirely comfortable with the implications. The last thing he wanted was for humanity to become the galaxy's technological overlords, even with the best of intentions. The sword's wisdom had taught him that power concentrated in any one species would eventually corrupt, regardless of their initial motives. "We'll need to be careful," Marcus warned. The ancients didn't leave their technology behind to create another empire. They wanted to ensure that knowledge would be preserved and shared when the galaxy was ready for it. Through the facility's viewports, Marcus could see the Nexari delegation's ship docking with the station. The former technological superiors had been among the most dramatically affected by the changes, their entire civilization forced to rebuild itself around cooperation rather than dominance. To their credit, they had embraced the transformation with remarkable adaptability. The Nexari ambassador who entered the observation lounge was the same individual who had led the attack on Kepler 442b, though they were barely recognizable. Gone was the intimidating armor and electronic voice distortion. Instead, they wore simple diplomatic robes and spoke in their natural voice, a surprisingly melodious tone that suggested their species had once valued art and beauty before becoming obsessed with technological supremacy. "Guardian Chen," the ambassador said, using the title that Marcus had reluctantly accepted. "My people have completed the reconstruction of our agricultural worlds using ancient biotechnology. For the first time in centuries, we're producing Enough food to feed our entire population without relying on conquered territories. Marcus smiled at the genuine gratitude in the Nexari's voice. Their species had discovered that ancient agricultural techniques could transform even barren worlds into garden paradises, eliminating the resource scarcity that had driven their expansion across the galaxy. Your people have adapted remarkably well, Marcus replied. The installation reports indicate that Nexari scientists are making significant contributions to the shared knowledge database. We've learned that cooperation yields far better results than conquest, the ambassador admitted. Our ancestors were fools to believe that stealing technology could replace genuine innovation. The transformation wasn't limited to the major galactic powers. Smaller species that had been marginalized or oppressed under the old order were flourishing with access to ancient knowledge. Worlds that had been strip-mined for resources were being restored using environmental technology that the ancients had perfected eons ago. The real test will come when we encounter species that aren't part of the Federation, Dr. Yelena observed. Ancient technology is spreading beyond our borders, and we don't know how external powers will respond to the changes. Marcus had been thinking about the same issue. Exploration ships were reporting that ancient installations were awakening in previously unexplored regions of the galaxy, suggesting that the technology's influence extended far beyond known space. Eventually, they would make contact with civilizations that had no knowledge of recent events, and those encounters could prove challenging. The ancients faced the same problem, Marcus said, drawing upon the sword's vast repository of memories. They encountered species at various stages of development, from primitive hunter-gatherers to advanced technological civilizations. Their solution was patience and gradual introduction of concepts. The sword pulsed softly as it shared more detailed information. The ancients had spent millions of years spreading throughout the galaxy, not as conquerors but as teachers. They had helped countless species take their first steps into space, guided others through dangerous technological transitions, and established the foundations for peaceful coexistence between radically different forms of life. They didn't disappear, Marcus realized, the truth hitting him like a physical blow. The ancients didn't vanish or transcend to another plane of existence. They evolved. The assembled delegates looked at him with confusion, but Marcus could see the pattern now. The genetic markers that allowed humans to interface with ancient technology weren't random mutations or gifts from vanished gods. They were inheritance, the legacy of a species that had chosen to scatter itself throughout the galaxy rather than maintain a centralized civilization. Humanity isn't just the guardian of ancient technology, Marcus continued, his voice filled with wonder and trepidation. We are the ancients. Or rather, we're what they became after millions of years of evolution and integration with other species. The implications were staggering. If humans were the direct descendants of the ancients, it explained their rapid technological advancement, their innovative problem-solving abilities, and their unusual capacity for adaptation. It also meant that other species throughout the galaxy might carry similar genetic legacy markers from different branches of ancient evolution. Dr. Yelena's tentacles trembled with excitement as she processed the revelation. It would explain the genetic diversity we've observed in species capable of interfacing with ancient technology. Not just humans, but scattered individuals from dozens of different civilizations. The Nexari ambassador stepped forward, their expression thoughtful. Our scientists have identified similar markers in our own population, though they're far less common than in humans. We assumed they were random mutations, but if they represent ancient heritage, Marcus nodded, understanding dawning. The ancients didn't just leave their technology behind as a gift. They left themselves, scattered and evolved, but still carrying the essence of what they had learned over millions of years. When the galaxy was ready, their descendants would awaken to guide civilization toward a better future. The responsibility that had already weighed heavily on Marcus's shoulders suddenly felt overwhelming. He wasn't just wielding ancient technology, he was carrying forward the mission of an entire vanished civilization. The sword in his hand represented not just power, but the accumulated wisdom of beings who had faced and solved the fundamental challenges of galactic existence. The awakening isn't random, Marcus continued, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. It's responding to galactic conditions. When the Federation reached a certain level of technological development and social complexity, the ancient programming activated. 1 year later, Marcus stood in the Grand Assembly Hall of New Geneva Station, watching as representatives from over 200 species took their seats for the first session of the reformed Galactic Federation. The sword hung at his side, its presence a constant reminder of how much had changed since that fateful day on Kepler 442b. The transformation had been remarkable, but not without challenges. 17 species had initially rejected the new cooperative framework, choosing instead to isolate themselves from the awakening ancient installations. 3 others had attempted to create their own technological hegemonies, only to discover that ancient technology simply refused to function for societies built on domination and exploitation. The resistance movements are weakening, reported Sarah Kim, one of the newest human guardians to manifest ancient heritage abilities. Her specialty was social engineering, using ancient psychological insights to help species adapt to the new paradigm. The Drakmarian Empire's food shortages have forced them to reconsider their isolationist stance. Marcus nodded, though he took no satisfaction in the suffering that stubbornness had caused. The Drakmarians had rejected ancient agricultural technology out of pride, insisting that their traditional methods were superior. Now their worlds faced starvation while neighboring systems flourished with abundant harvests. "Any word from the exploration fleets?" Marcus asked. "Captain Morrison's expedition made contact with the Ethereal Collective last week," Sarah reported. "They're a crystalline species that achieved spaceflight about 2,000 years ago. Completely peaceful, apparently, but their entire philosophy is based on individual consciousness rather than collective cooperation. The discovery of new species beyond Federation space had become increasingly common as ancient navigation technology guided exploration ships to previously unknown civilizations. Each contact brought new challenges and opportunities, as the galaxy revealed itself to be far more diverse than anyone had imagined. Dr. Yelena approached from across the hall, her excitement evident in the rapid movement of her tentacles. "Guardian Chen, we've received confirmation from the deep space monitoring stations. The quantum resonance cascade has reached the galactic rim. Every ancient installation in known space is now fully operational." The news was both thrilling and sobering. The cascade effect that had begun on Kepler 442b had taken a full year to spread across the galaxy, awakening ancient technology on millions of worlds. The sheer scale of the network was staggering, a technological infrastructure that spanned the entire galaxy and had been waiting patiently for the right moment to reveal itself. "How many new Guardians have manifested abilities in the past month?" Marcus inquired. "Over 3,000 across all species," Dr. Yelena replied. "Not just humans, though we still represent the largest percentage. The Centaurians have produced several individuals with remarkable medical intuition abilities. The reformed Nexari have manifested engineering specialists who can interface directly with ancient manufacturing systems." Marcus smiled at the mention of the Nexari. Their transformation had been one of the most dramatic success stories of the past year. The species that had once terrorized the galaxy through technological superiority had become some of the most effective teachers and innovators in the new order. Their experience with stolen ancient technology had given them unique insights into how the original systems were meant to function. A gentle chime indicated that the assembly session was about to begin. Marcus took his place at the Guardian's podium, a position he had reluctantly accepted after months of political maneuvering. The various species had insisted on formal recognition of the Guardian hierarchy, despite his preference for a more collaborative approach. "Distinguished delegates," Marcus began, his words automatically translated into hundreds of languages and communication methods. "1 year ago, we discovered that the galaxy contains wonders beyond our imagination. Today, we gather not as separate species competing for resources, but as inheritors of a legacy that spans millions of years." The assembly hall fell silent as delegates from across the galaxy listened. Among them sat former enemies who had learned to cooperate, primitive species that had been uplifted through ancient knowledge, and advanced civilizations that had discovered humility in the face of technology beyond their comprehension. "The ancients left us more than just tools and knowledge," Marcus continued. "They left us a choice. We can use their gifts to build the same old patterns of dominance and conflict, or we can evolve beyond the limitations that have plagued galactic civilization for millennia. Through the sword's connection, Marcus could sense the thoughts and emotions of many delegates. Hope predominated, but there were also currents of fear, uncertainty, and old prejudices that would take generations to overcome. The transformation of galactic society was far from complete. The reports from our exploration fleets confirm what we've long suspected, Marcus announced. The ancient network extends beyond our galaxy. We've detected quantum resonance signatures from Andromeda, the Magellanic Clouds, and at least a dozen other galactic clusters. The civilization that created this technology was truly universal in scope. The revelation sent murmurs of amazement through the assembly. The idea that ancient technology existed on such a vast scale was almost incomprehensible, suggesting that the galaxy's transformation was just one small part of a much larger cosmic evolution. As we move forward, we must remember that this heritage comes with responsibilities, Marcus warned. The ancients didn't vanish because they were defeated or transcended. They evolved into something greater than any single species could achieve alone. They became the foundation upon which all subsequent civilizations could build. Marcus paused, feeling the weight of destiny settling on the assembled delegates. Through the sword's vast memory banks, he could see glimpses of what the galaxy might become. Worlds where different species worked together so seamlessly that the boundaries between them became meaningless. Technologies that could reshape matter at the quantum level, and a civilization capable of spreading life throughout the universe itself. The choice before us is simple, Marcus concluded. We can remain separate, competing civilizations struggling for survival in an uncaring universe. Or we can become something new, a truly galactic species capable of carrying the ancient legacy forward to other galaxies, other dimensions, and other forms of existence we can barely imagine. The assembly erupted in discussion as delegates debated the implications of Marcus's words. Some were excited by the possibilities he described, while others worried about losing their cultural identities in such a vast collective enterprise. Marcus stepped back from the podium and felt the sword pulse with satisfaction. The weapon's purpose was nearly complete. It had awakened the galaxy to its true potential and guided the first steps toward a new form of civilization. Soon there would be no need for individual guardians, as the ancient knowledge became so integrated into galactic society that it was simply part of everyday existence. Looking out at the diverse assembly of beings working together to solve problems that had seemed insurmountable just a year ago, Marcus allowed himself a moment of pride. Humanity might have been considered primitive by galactic standards, but they had proven themselves worthy inheritors of the greatest civilization the universe had ever known. The sword's light pulsed one final time, then settled into a steady glow that would burn for eternity. A beacon calling all conscious beings toward a future where cooperation conquered conflict, where wisdom overcame ignorance, and where the dream of the ancients finally became reality.